Good afternoon. Welcome to Home Sweet Gardens. If you're new, welcome. If you like the videos, please click the subscribe button and a thumbs up if you enjoy the video. We'd love to have you. If you're not new, welcome back. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about vertical gardening. It's something that I learned through reading books, through YouTube videos, something that really interested me because I have an above ground or container bed garden, and so I don't have a whole lot of space. So I was looking for a way that I could grow multiple plants but not have it take up so much, because zucchini and squash especially, they kind of go over and they trail along in the bed and they can take up quite a bit of space. So I was looking for some way that I could get more bang for my buck, if you will. So I want to talk to you a little bit first about the tools that I use. You can use any tools you want. It could be something that you had in a drawer, something you found, or if you want to go buy stuff, it's whatever you prefer. These are just things that I've picked up along the way, found, whatever, and they tend to work for me. So first thing is, you have to be able to tie the stalk, the main stalk of the plant up, and to do that you need to think about how it's going to affect the stalk of the plant, because remember, it's a living, breathing thing that's somewhat fragile. Doesn't seem like it is, but it can be fragile and it can be damaged rather easily. So I have 3 different examples here, and I know that there's some other things that I don't have. One of them would be, there's a Velcro type tape that you use that you wrap around the stalk of the plant, and then it would Velcro to it. I don't have any of that, but I've heard of people using it. But the first thing would be your basic twine, garden twine. You can get this at Walmart or any garden centers. You could use yarn, baby blanket yarn if you've got some left over or something. It really doesn't matter. The thing about this is it's so thin, so you think about that stalk, and if you pull it tight, it's going to cut into that stalk, and eventually, especially if there's pressure, it could cut into that stalk and damage it, and introduce pests and parasites and fungus and all kinds of other things that you don't want. So if you do use something like this, make sure that you don't tie it quite as tight, and you tie it more frequently all the way up the stalk, using more of it. Same thing with the yarn, but if you took a yarn, I guess you could put several strands of it together and braid it and make it thicker, especially depending on the type of yarn you use. The other thing is which you can get this at Walmart or any garden center. This is kind of like your bread ties, but in a large roll. I use this for when I am tying my pantyhose over my squash that are hanging from my trellis, and I'll do another video about that a little later in the season, when I start to have some of those butternut squash and whatnot starting to come in on the trellis. I don't actually put these on the plant itself. I use it to tie the pantyhose or material to the actual wire of the trellis. I've used these to put a stake in the ground and tie it to another stake or something like that, but I don't use these on the plants. If you did, again, you'd want to make sure it's really loose, and you'd want to keep an eye on it, but I don't recommend using it on the plant itself. The thing that I tend to use quite a bit is the garden ribbon, I call it. Florist tape, I think maybe is another name for it. Again, you can get Walmart, you can get at garden centers, pretty much anywhere. Amazon, of course, would carry all this stuff. And I like it because it's flexible. You can just tear it with your fingers, so you don't need any kind of special tools, scissors or whatever. And it's pretty thick. So when I wrap it around that stalk, I make sure that I put it to where it's not twisted or turned, and then I can pull it straight. And so it's got a wider surface area, so it doesn't create so much of a chance of damaging the plant. As far as when I'm trimming the leaves and other things off of the plants, some of the tools that I keep on me whenever I'm doing gardening is I keep a pair of gardening hand clippers. Again, it doesn't really matter. This is Fiskars. I think I got them at Walmart. I've picked some up at an auction, or found a pair out at grandma's, whatever. If you have an older pair, because you want to make sure that they're working rather well, put a little oil on them, whatnot. It's really important that you clean your tools. In fact, I need to clean these. They've gotten pretty dirty. At least towards the end of this season, I always scrub them really well and then oil them before I put them away. And then again in the spring, I check them to make sure, sharpen them if they need to be sharpened and whatnot. And that way, you know, the last thing you want is a dull tool that's then going to damage your plant. The whole point of using this is so that you can get a nice clean, crisp cut. And if they're dirty and dull and marred and whatnot, then it defeats the purpose. The other thing I keep with me is a basic utility type knife. It's got the little scissors here, which I do have a pair of scissors for when I'm snipping different things, but I like this because if it's something simple and quick, I can just use that to cut something off. Obviously this isn't something that you would use quite a bit, but the knife section of this, and again keeping it sharp, but I will use this quite a bit, and I like it because it just goes up and it fits right in my RIU apron that I wear when I'm harvesting my plants or working on my plants. I have another knife in there that's a lot larger, but it's not something that I can carry around. This I can just stick in my pocket, you know, and it's easy to use. And it's got all kinds of stuff on here that I don't need, but it's still, you know, good to have. Let's talk about the different stakes that we can use when we're staking up our plants next. When it comes to staking up your garden plants, you want to use something that's going to be strong enough for the job that you're doing. For my zucchini and my squash or any of those other plants that may be a little bit heavier, I use a stake very much like this. Okay, it's about a 1x1 piece of wood. It's about 4 foot tall, and when I plant the plant into the ground, I drive it in relatively close to the stem, making sure that I'm not damaging those plants. And here's the zucchini that we'll be talking about in a minute. And I put them in there when the plants are put there relatively early. That way the root system hasn't quite gotten established, and I'm not going to risk damaging any roots that may have gone out. The other things that you could use as well, pardon my mess down there, would be bamboo. Bamboo is pretty strong. It doesn't weather as easily, and you can get it in different thicknesses like this one or this one here. This is about a finger's width. This one I think would be considered an inch or inch and a half, something like that. And they come in various sizes. You can break them, cut them, whatever. They don't weather as well, and they're not always as sturdy, although these are pretty sturdy in here. Then you can have the metal that are the plastic coated in different sizes, and this one's a very large one, which would work as well. And again, you can cut them or whatever you need to do. The most important thing is making sure that you get it into the ground as soon as you can while the plants are young, not to disturb the roots, but also making sure that it's in the ground deep enough to where it's going to be able to hold what you're wanting to do. Okay, so this is a prime example of a vertical zucchini. It's just your regular average zucchini plant. There's different kinds. There's bush kinds. There's also your basically all your varieties. But you can see how here's your basic stem, and it grows up, and I have used the tape to tie up as it goes, and I cut off each of the branches. You want to make sure when you're cutting them off that you cut them off right as close to the stem as possible without actually damaging the stem. That can introduce infection and other bad things that you don't want. So this will continue to grow higher and higher and higher, and it's actually really helpful for the plant. So I'm going through here and I am cutting off. You can use a knife or whatever. This is an old flower, the male part of the flower, that is no longer got one on it, obviously, so I'm cutting that off. And I'm going to go through and I'm going to cut off the base, the bottom leaves. And see, I cut it as close to it as possible without actually cutting the main stalk of the plant. Now you can cut them off aggressively if you want. I don't typically do that. I tend to cut them off a little bit at a time. And that way they have plenty of leaves. Now if one's in my way, let's say, then I'll go ahead and cut it off. like this one's sticking out in my walkway, I'm gonna go ahead and cut that one because I don't want to I have to keep walking around it. Now, again, make sure that you don't cut these flowers off. That's still an active flower, and that's how they pollinate. If you don't have those, then you're not going to have any fruit. Here, you can see where I had cut a zucchini off, and it didn't get quite cut as low as I wanted it. So I'm just going to go ahead and retrim that. And then I take my leftover, the different flower stalks and the leaves, and I put them in my compost pot. You're going to want to cut these up into smaller pieces when you do that. That way it breaks up easily. And if your zucchini or your plants have any kind of fungus, powdery mildew or anything like that, then you don't want to put those into your compost pile because it can introduce that into the next ones. Go ahead and cut this one here and this one here. Now you can see how it's a little damp, and there will be fluid, liquid and whatnot coming out of it, and that's okay. And it'll actually kind of ooze out a little bit because the leaves hold the water, and that's okay. That's normal. Now I need to tie up the top part of this plant. So I'm going to take my garden ribbon. You can use really anything, string, tape, there's Velcro. You just want to be careful because you don't want it to cut into the vines. You don't really want anything that's real thin. If you use the twine, you're going to need to do more tying off and make it looser. You don't want it to injure the stalk in any way. So I'm wrapping it in between. I'm carefully going in between all the little buds, and I'm going to pull it up to the post as much as I can without damaging anything. And then I'm just going to tie it off. And the more you do this, the closer you do it, the more stable this plant is going to be. If I only did, like here and here, well, it would have started bending by that point, and then you have to pull it back up. Also keep in mind when you trim off the leaves that sometimes it'll grow a new leaf, a new branch, and it'll try to do almost like a secondary stalk, and you don't want that. You'll want to go ahead and cut that off as well. That was an old zucchini that I cut off, so I wanted to cut that back as well. And you'll notice the stalk is really healthy. It's nice and green. It's not all mildewy and white and look like it's starting to have things bore into it. I do have squash bugs, but not that many, because I think it's because I do this vertical. They're not able to get up it as much. They don't have the leaves and stuff laying on the ground. And also I'm able to see them easier. So every day, part of that gardening maintenance, every day when I come out, I'm looking for those bugs and I'm picking them off and disposing of them. I'm also looking underneath the leaves to see, like right here. So I can get some off to show you. I don't know if you'll be able to see that, but these are little eggs. So you want to make sure that there aren't any of those. See right here on the understock of that stem are some eggs. So you're going to want to gently get rid of those. And that keeps any pesky little bugs from getting on it. I think the reason why I'm so excited about vertical gardening is that it gives me the extra space I need to be able to plant more things in my garden, and it gives me a different view of it. When I first started looking into maximizing my space and the different things that I could do, there wasn't a whole lot on it. I read as much as I could on the internet about it, but if you're somebody like me, I like pictures or videos. I like to see. I'm very visual, and there was only a couple of videos on YouTube about it, and there was one that gave a lot of good pictures and good visuals, and that's what I learned a lot from. And then of course I just learned the rest by trial and error by doing it for the last 2-3 years, and I've had a lot of people ask me about it, and so that's why I decided to do this video. If you have any other questions about it, or suggestions of how I could do it better, or things that maybe I could do differently, I would love to hear from you. Fellow gardeners, that's how we learn every single day, is learn by each other and experiences, what works, what doesn't work in different areas. So again, if you have any comments, please leave them for me. Leave a thumbs up if you liked the video. Subscribe to my channel. I try to put up a video at least once a week about something to do with maintenance or gardening or different topics, and then I also do a garden tour every Saturday that's usually uploaded by Sunday. So again, welcome. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for watching, and until next time, happy gardening.